Hey everyone, welcome. So in this video, what I wanted to do is continue to talk about some of those principles of composition. Last time we discussed foundations and the role they play in organizing imagery akin to language, or trying to use those foundational elements to say something more than just, how can I describe what I see objectively? So it's more about trying to say something, and I hope that that inspires you to continue to practice the fundamentals or your foundations, because it can do something in excess to just making something perfect. Last time, Angra was discussed and this bather. So instead, we're going to do something different, or in contrast, we're going to do something different, or look at a different image or picture. I did look at a lot of feedback or read your feedback and comments last time, and it was pretty varied in terms of the things that interest or confused you. And so I'll try to address that, but also push you a little bit in this video as well. And so in contrast to Angra, what I'd like to look at this time around is Ian Schiele, who is an expressionist artist, not in an overlapping time period. So later, Angra is early 1800s, Schiele is late 1800s, early 1900s. And I think they represent a contrasting view on an approach to the figure. Angra might be more objective, even though there is some stylization. It's more representational, quote unquote, or it pushes toward being more realistic. And that's fine if that's your thing, but it doesn't have to be, right? There's only options. And so what I would encourage you to do is study people you don't like. Study people you don't like so that you understand a myriad of ways to approach and organize an image. A lot of the feedback I saw was, I only want to study people I like, or I only like this person. Well, try to broaden, right? When you don't like something, take an interest in it. See if you can understand why you don't like something. Some of the things I've initially not enjoyed have eventually turned out to be some of my very favorite things once I've come to understood them or build an appreciation for them. So what I want to look at is the same format, the same structure. Remember last time what we tried to do was organize the foundations to look at a composition through what is unifying an image and then what provides variety. And so when we looked at Angra last time, we said, well, that is kind of it's not perfect, but there might be a golden mean type of composition there. And through a study of the material and the supporting material in terms of background props, organization of space, perspective, we found that variety and unity were working hand in hand, or what I would say is supporting one another to create a feeling of intimacy. So a lot of the times what I'm doing is I'm trying to look at the picture, diagnose it through my fundamentals, or the foundational elements, line, straight, all those types of things, straight, C, S, shape. And then what is the resulting content? So I'm trying to get to content, not just endlessly masturbate with the foundation principles. How straight can I make a straight? How perfect is my ellipse? What I always thought was interesting between a comparison in these two is that they use the same unifying format, right? So if we did a little mock-up, this is how I would start my compositional studies, by the way, that the thumbnail, right, how is the frame being used, is almost identical. Right, so if I look at this one, right, remember what we talked about last time, I'm so used to teaching sequentially at a college. Everything is last time, last week. That our skeleton of the composition or frame can be these verticals, or the vertical that splits it in half, the horizontal that splits it in half, your diagonals, and that always goes through the center. And that each one of those lines produces an effect, right? So that would just be the template of the composition in the way that I understand it. Organized over that, or on top of that, I saw a golden mean being used, right? And so part of what makes this feel asymmetrical, a little bit more dynamic, is that it tends to avoid that center or flirts with it. And that's why I'm referring to the Angra painting there. But based on the focal point, that's what I would usually look for to see what unifies an image. Where is the eye predominantly directed to? I see that it's more in line with that golden mean, shorthand golden mean, dirty golden mean, let's say. If I look at the Chile one, it's very similar, right? So it does organize itself at least in an asymmetrical composition, perhaps golden mean, right? So maybe we could say the arm kind of going that way gives us enough golden mean to look at that in a similar way. So that would be something that unifies it. But in contrast to the painting of the bather, there doesn't seem to be support for it. So let's try to study this in the same way that we might have looked at our image last time. So I'm doing a little bit bigger one to study to see if I can organize some of those big principles around the same way. And I think just to get started, I'm going to do my big layout. So these are my main axes. Now, if I were going to do a little study of composition in a life drawing context, I would do something like this as well. And that might be a future video, but the exercise that I would go through is essentially to try to avoid making the figure congruent to any of these axes and pushing for asymmetry. The foundation principles that we're always discussing. That might have been a Freudian slip of sorts. Line. What is the quality of shape? And then, even though we haven't been doing much in our discussions here on value and color, they are things that can be thrown in, but let's just keep it to these two, since a lot of the videos pertain and deal with drawing, linear elements. And let's say that I think it is on that golden mean, or it organizes space in a way that's consistent to the golden mean. And maybe I'll put that, I think the axis is up here, because the head and the hand and the arm go a little bit further in that direction. So here's how I think this field, the picture plane, is being organized in the most kind of unifying way, or unified way. So I'm going to write that here because this is how I would study. What's unifying the picture is dirty golden mean. And then what is it that's supporting or creating tension or contrast? So I think the big idea in this is shape, right? So look at the contrast here just in terms of shape. So that's something that you can begin to understand. Let's say everybody loves Sargent. So let's say you love Sargent. You're a devout Sargent follower, and you love all things that kind of inspired Sargent, like British portraiture, and you just love that shape design. Well, use that as a departure point, and then see if you can look at other things that vary from his aesthetic and try to appreciate them for the quality of communication because of that difference. What do they say, in other words, because they don't match Sargent perfectly? Well, in this, I would say the biggest difference is this, the contrast of shape. So if I start to explore this, let's say, let's do first just a basic kind of figure lay-in. So I'm gonna just do some mannequin here, where I'm gonna place my figure in a way that just gives me the basic setup. Like if I were to lay in my mannequin from my like gesture course or life drawing course, without looking at the contour and all that, what I'm really trying to do is just think about that basic mannequin and place it relative to the composition. And so here's like rib cage, waist, head. I can kind of see an elbow going this way. And then I could see some really interesting anatomical landmarks, like here's the ulna and the funny bone. And then the hand is over here. So these shapes are not looking at anything other than where the proportion is for the big picture. So, and then the shoulder is here. Down. And then at the bottom, what do I see? The elbow and then the forearm moving towards the left side of the image. And so there's just a big basic lay-in. It kind of positions things for me. So what do I notice first about this? Well, let's talk about the frame and its relationship to the figure. What's different about this picture to this one? Well, look at the space around the figure as it interacts with the frame. The figure is comfortably placed inside, and if I look at the negative shape, the distance between the figure and the frame, it's different and asymmetrical. Each space as it relates figure to frame, is unique and different. None of these spaces are the same. And what I generally look for if I'm trying to place the figure comfortably in a frame like this is that starting from the head to the top, that you would take this distance and double it from the foot to the bottom. From the right side or left side of the figure to the frame, I would take this distance and at least create a double to that. So that way the space is constantly asymmetrical and changing around the figure as it relates to the frame. That's a way of creating and supporting ideas of comfort, right? That quality of a unified image. Is that happening here? Perhaps, right? It's possible. The top of the head, right, is maybe doubled here. The left side of the figure is maybe doubled there. So there are some things that are more comfortable. The figure is on the golden mean. The spacing around the figure continues to be asymmetrical as it relates to the exchange or the changing proportion of space from figure to frame. But I think there's clearly some things here that are meant to create discomfort. So there's a lot of things that give us one, but other elements that create variety, that's what this side is, would be the crops. So what's happening with the figure as it relates to the frame? It's not comfortably inside like that one. So that idea of spacing might be out the window. Instead, cropped, tangent, right? So those three areas, uncomfort or discomfort visually. Why? A good rule is never crop at halves, halfway down the arm. Most people will do it at thirds if they're looking to create a more consistent feeling of the figure just going out of frame. Sometimes halves create a feeling of decapitation or cutting. So here he's done that, and I would argue on purpose. It's at a joint or half everywhere. So this might be the top of the pelvis. This is halfway down the arm. And this is tangent, which is a no-no most of the time, right? Tangent would mean that we take and instead of using the frame as a window onto another area, another plane, another world, we put an object directly on the frame in a way that makes us aware of that artifice, like that window. It cancels space, in other words. So that's an element of variety, an element of variation, creating contrast. It's contrasting with the basic unifying principle of harmony, which is the golden mean. So he draws you in with the harmony, and then as you're there, he draws you in with that positioning of comfort, and then as you're there, he starts to challenge it. He undercuts it. He subverts it with these different elements of a visual practice, visual language. The next might be shape. So let's look at some of his shapes. What are the different shapes that he's using? What are they? Well, if we look at the figure in total, his shapes are not perfect and clean lines, right? How often today is that something that we feel like we're expected to do? Like create the perfect line and finish it as we go through the drawing, as if we're kind of machines that just pump out these different realistic scenes without any kind of mediating steps to produce them. This is purposeful, right? Look at the quality of the body under these lines and shapes. The forms are undulating. Every anatomical nuance is brought out in greater detail or greater relief. Right? Look at the extension of the arm, the elongation of the arm, and the weird kind of bubbling or peaking of the bicep in two different areas, or the wandering of the pectoralis. And more importantly than this, of course, the distortion of the figure has a purpose and is right with reason. This is the early expressionism. So Schiele is an expressionist artist. He's an Austrian artist working during World War I. His intention is to create a feeling of discomfort. His drawings are generally described as being psychologically aggressive, sexualized. He was taken to court for kind of the idea of his drawings having a pornographic bent or element to them. But it's more fitting, I think, a depiction of the figure during tumult, a period of war, right? So it's this is an artist that studied foundations, had a classical training, but made a deliberate choice in style to picture or to show us a different quality, right, of understanding the figure. And we could see that everywhere. You can see the way that the lines are progressing and used, how he knows anatomy. I could see the scapula, right? I could see the, maybe the bump for the teres major or something there. I could see that he understands the rib cage, there's ribs, etc. I know he knows definitely knows the medial epicondyle, the funny bone, because it's there, right? But then takes all these liberties with the body to create a different effect, right? So you'd have that here, and even though it maintains that kind of Ong-like principle of keeping all of the shapes asymmetrical around the body and the figure, what ends up happening is that the quality of shape becomes very different, right? So the shape itself, if we just compare and contrast shapes, what we looked at with the Ingres painting was all beautiful, passive, rhythmic forms with lots of curves, right? With beautiful curves, almost no sharp angles in it at all. This is the opposite. Everything here is attenuated, distorted, more aggressive, right? And so this is the backstory to everything we see in character design, where there's a passive sidekick, a beautiful princess, something that's pleasing versus a villain, which is aggressive and angular, and because of that feels predatory. So over here we could put crops, deliberately made to make us feel, or used to make us feel uncomfortable, cut, and then that's followed by, let's say, a more aggressive treatment of shape in the way that it distorts the body. So what is the product of this, right? The use of simple foundational tools in the format of composition with an eye toward communication. Unity, or what unifies the picture and what varies it, are in contrast. And as a result, what's produced is visual tension. There's a tension in this image, a balance between the beautiful and the grotesque. And something like this, I think, is a natural progression. Look at the figure in idealism. Look at the figure in periods of expressionism. Look at the figure in a different period of art history, and see if you can understand every register of how you communicate, or every possibility for how you might choose to use your foundations down the line.